Welcome back to the Who Witch Where podcast, where I talk to witches about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft. In this episode, Sarah Louise of Bright Witch Brews joins us from Australia. She tells us a ghost story from New Orleans, explains why you might be mysteriously drawn to her tea shop, and manages to get me to reveal one of my great fears. There's even a discount code at the end of the episode for her shop. Now let's get on to the stories. All right, welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I'm just going to say it because we had to start all over again because my computer turned off because I didn't realize that it had come unplugged. So welcome back again.
Thank you.
It's really, thank you very much for coming on the show and for tolerating these hijinks that seem to be happening.
I'm really excited to be here. I've been listening to all of your other episodes and I've been really enjoying all of the questions that you've been asking are really interesting. And I've been really enjoying just mulling them over and having a bit of a contemplation. It's been really nice.
Oh, good. Please introduce yourself, introduce your business, tell us who it's for, what you do, and why it's different from others like it that are out there.
Sure. So I'm Sarah Louise. I'm an artist and creative writer and tea witch at Bright Witch. So I sell enchanting little tea blends with edible glitter, and I write cozy tea time tales, and I hope that soon I'll be expanding out into some art prints as well. So the whole intention behind this business was to create just this really kind of enthralling sensory experience and to kind of offer a place of inspiration and sanctuary from the day-to-day. So with the tea, everything about the tactile experience of it is really important to me. So I wanted to have just these really beautiful scents and flavors and the aesthetic with the glitter, and I just really wanted to make this little magical potion from something that I at least drink every single day. And with my tea tales and my art, I wanted to give people little fantasy and a magical world that they could kind of visit and lose themselves in and engage their imagination. So the way that my business is different from others out there is that I think I really like to focus on the sensory delight and just create this really novel experience and kind of enrich that with these little tea tales and little magical writings and at the moment I'm working on a long form story, as well as I write little tea tales that are just these little tea break escapes, and I haven't seen really other people marry those two things together.
Yeah.
And I really think that words have a lot of power. And so the writing that I do through Bright Witch, I really want to just invoke this sense of magic and awe. And you can find me at brightwitch.com. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok at Bright Witch Brews, though I'm mostly active on Instagram.
I'm really excited to try your stuff because when Charlie and Macy described it, they were talking about the glitter, and I am not a glitter person, but I want to eat some glitter. And it just sounds gorgeous, and I can just imagine how beautiful it is and how I'm specifically talking about the blue moon, right?
Yeah, the blue moon is definitely a favorite.
I am dying to try that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to send you some.
I plan on ordering some, so. And my patrons are going to be in for a surprise if any of them listen. I know at least one of you do. Get ready for that. Don't tell anyone else. Now, what does it mean to you when you call yourself a witch?
So most of my magical practice, at least, from day to day, it focuses less on the external aspects of spellcraft. So less on, specific little ritual things or working with ingredients or objects, and is more focused on creating internal states of feeling or states of being. So I daydream a lot, and lately I've been trying to really focus on using my imagination and my daydreams as my main magical practice and means of spell casting, because it's just something I do naturally almost all day, every day. So at the moment, my beliefs kind of lean towards ideas of panpsychism. So the idea that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the cosmos at large. So
Oh no,
the
that's making me
oh
think
no.
things.
Oh, they're going, you're wrong. No. I know the secret.
What? What?
Yeah, so there's a bit of background to coming to those kinds of ideas, and then they're not even really set in stone beliefs, because there's so much we don't know about the way everything works that it seems kind of foolish to go, yes, this is definitely the way things work, and this is definitely how magic works, and this is definitely how consciousness works. Like I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we can ever say that as human beings with with the senses that we have. But the general kind of philosophy I guess I subscribe to is this idea that where do you where do you draw a line between what is conscious and what's aware? And is we've got human sentience, and then we've got animal sentience, and then earthworm sentient is going all the way down. Are those microorganisms sentient? Like where do you draw the line
I'm
between?
afraid of sentient microorganisms, because what if all your cells decide they don't want to be you anymore? That's like a legit fear I have.
Oh wow.
I hate that.
I love that as a horror story idea. That's amazing. Oh
Things that keep
god.
me up at night. I don't wish that I didn't think of it.
Just erase that thought. So yeah, my general idea is that kind of everything is conscious, like just this little building blocks that kind of spin themselves up into these little complex forms that and complex life. And so I think that when we connect to our own internal consciousness, that's almost like a communication with the wider consciousness, and that kind of pulls on little threads across reality beyond ourselves. So um, that's why I work a lot with imagination and with states of feeling and states of being, and I guess just trying to work with my own internal consciousness through imagination.
That's
And now I'm
very similar
imagining
to
all
what
of my cells in my body just going, nah, quitting
I don't
time.
like this chick.
Didn't like that idea. I actually really like that idea from just a story perspective.
I don't want to read that. That's really, I feel like that's similar to what I believe. I'm just
Yeah,
really bad
yeah.
at expressing myself. Wow.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that just ideas of animism and that just imbuing inanimate objects with a state of life, I guess, and then I guess taking that one step further and going, well, just taking it down to the smallest little particles.
I do believe in a universal consciousness, though.
Yeah.
I
Have you
mean,
had any experiences with that?
no,
Like,
I hope not. If I don't want to think about that. There's just so much mundane crap going on in my life. I don't want to think about the
that's
universe
enough.
talking to me.
That's enough to be
Not
dealing with.
today. Would you mind introducing us to your any daily practices that you have?
Sure. So most of my daily practices just focus around just moments in mundane life where I make time to either ground myself or um, just kind of daydream in an intentional way. So I'm always drinking tea. Like I'll make so many cups of tea throughout my day, and I'll maybe drink half of them before they go cold. But I'll just stir some intention into my tea, or ground myself as I'm making it, because it's just such a little tactile sensory process that engages so many senses. Or I'll just take like a break in the middle of my day and just go stretch out my legs or whatever, and just spend some time in my own head. And that's most of my practice. I used to be really interested in, I guess, the daily rituals that I guess you would typically associate with more witchcrafty kinds of things, like tarot draws, or I used to use my pendulum a lot. I've got this little necklace that I bought online. It's a little foxglove pendant that I use as a little pendulum, and I really enjoyed using that. I used to do little candle rituals where I'd just sit and watch a flame for a little bit while I was doing my morning setups and those kinds of things, or doing my makeup. But since I've been at home, I've been working from home, I haven't really been doing my makeup that often, so I haven't had that ritualistic aspect in my day for a couple of years now. But maybe I should start doing that again. I find candle flames quite soothing.
Yeah. What kind of things would you ask it?
So when I first started, I was really interested in consciousness. So I was coming from a history where I just kind of didn't really believe that there was really anything beyond the brain in terms of conscious experience. So we live in our little meat suits and we go about our days, and then we die, and then it's game over kind of thing. That's what I used to believe. And then I had some experiences that made me reconsider reconsider that stance on things. And so a lot of the questions I would ask my pendulum were things about afterlife and pre-life, and reincarnation, and what are the bounds of consciousness, and, and those kinds of things, but trying to put them into a yes or no format. And it's not something that I took super seriously, and that I didn't take the answers from it as gospel, because you're dealing with the subconscious, which I don't think, when that bubbles up to the conscious brain, is a super reliable witness. But it was a lot of fun.
Pre-life?
Yeah,
I mean, that makes sense, but
yeah, I was reading these books by a hypnotherapist from the 60s. I am really trying to remember her name. I'm gonna say Dolores Cannon.
okay.
Yeah, it's Dolores Cannon, and she's got these books where during her hypnotherapy sessions, she accidentally regressed someone back before birth into the kind of space before life,
Mm-hmm.
before someone incarnates. And I'm still very skeptical of these ideas, but I find them really, really interesting. So I read a few of her books and was kind of using the pendulum to kind of probe into these ideas of uh, questions like, have I been alive before? Have I been dead before? Those kinds of things.
Okay, random question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that pre-life and post-life are the same plane or place?
Oh, my assumption was yes. Because the way I think about it is it's kind of this astral, imaginal, soupy kind of realm that we come from and then return to. But I could be completely wrong. Um, I personally don't have any memories as such of these kinds of places. But have you seen the film What Dreams May Come
No.
with Robin Williams?
No.
Oh, it's
Maybe I have. Maybe I've seen parts of it. I know what
yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's quite a heavy film, so like content warning for topics of death and self-harm and these kinds of things.
I
But
have seen it, but it
yeah,
was a long time ago. And it
that
bothered me, so I wiped it out of my memory.
It's an intense film. It can be pretty dark and pretty heavy, but overall, the way they present ideas of afterlife and pre-life and reincarnation and just that kind of astral realm as being really influenced by your own state of consciousness is kind of what you experience in this really fantastical kind of malleable environment that kind of connects to the physical world, so you can communicate through these um, artistic little modalities, and that's kind of how I think that it works when you get into those kinds of realms of reality, I guess.
It's just weird that this is coming up because I talked about this with Charlie.
Oh,
And it was at random. It was not a planned conversation, just like now.
I'm trying to think.
Am I going to
Oh,
die?
okay. I don't think I finished that interview yet. I'm 37 minutes into it, so I'll have to
I
listen to
haven't
the rest
released
of it.
it's in the second part.
Oh, the second part. Okay. Yeah, I can't. I've been
Why
really
is this
enjoying
coming up?
listening to them.
I'm paranoid now. Great.
There is no such thing as a coincidence.
Awesome. Do you have any family history with witchcraft?
I'd probably say a lot of the women in my family are pretty witchy, but I don't think they would call themselves witches. I could be wrong, but I grew up in quite a Catholic family.
Oh.
I was never very dogmatic myself, but my extended family on both sides are fairly religious, and I was kind of always into magic, and especially the idea of fairies as a little girl, and then as a teen, I got into astrology and crystals and Wicca during that 90s, early thousands New Age resurgence. And
When
I
the
grew
craft
up
came
on
out.
exactly like those 90s
Yep.
witches movies are my heritage. Yeah, so I grew up on things like the craft and practical magic.
Yeah.
And the craft is kind of a little bit darker, but I never really found the idea of witches to be evil or kind of scary. Like I just wasn't really exposed to that kind of rhetoric growing up. And my grandma was always making me like little fairy type of costumes for my dolls and teddies and things, and pasting glittery little fairies on my hairbrushes for me. And she's an incredible gardener, and she used to have this just amazing sprawling garden. So there was always this kind of, like secret fairies live at the bottom of the garden kind of sense. I was really taken with the idea of angels, especially like guardian angels. And I used to get these little angel pins from my relatives for religious events like, Eucharist and confirmation. And I still have my collection of little angel pins. So I guess there's a little bit of a bleed through from some of the, I guess, religious imagery I grew up from into I guess, into my magical sense.
Are you out to your family?
Am I out to my family? Like I haven't had a conversation where I'm like explicitly, I am a witch and I do witchcraft kind of conversation, but I mean, my family, at least all of my immediate family and some of my extended family, know about my Bright Witch tea business, and they know that it's pretty witchy, and they look at the Instagram and what I post, so it wouldn't come as a shock, I don't think. There's probably a section of my extended family that I probably just wouldn't mention it to it because I don't think they'd go in for the idea of witchcraft because they're very, very Catholic, like attending mass in Latin level of Catholic, and I don't know if they'd be quite into the idea of witchcraft. I'm not sure where their beliefs lie on that kind of thing.
And that's like the witchiest
It's the
version.
witchiest religion, exactly.
What was your first experience with witchcraft?
First experience. So it's kind of really hard to draw a line, honestly. So as a kid, I'm sure I fed magical potions to my bear, or so, if I was mixing little hot chocolates and cackling or something. And I collected. There was this sometimes through news agencies and post offices, you could get these like little subscription things. So there was this set of astrology cards that would come out kind of every week or every month, and you'd pay $5 and get a little set of cards, and then you collect the next bit. And I collected little astrology cards that way, so zodiac cards. And then
Neat.
yeah, it was really, I don't think I still have them, which is a shame. I don't think I ever finished the set, but I remember in later primary, so maybe I was in 5th or 6th grade, my dad used to take my brother and I into his work office while he worked on weekends. So the place would be completely empty, but we had unlimited access to the office printers. So my brother was printing out just stacks and stacks and stacks of Dragon Ball art, and I was printing out like just pages of spells and crystal meanings and herb uses, and just made myself like this just chunky book of shadows.
So that's amazing.
Yeah, it was so much fun. It's just like this black and white printer, and so it's just printing out list and list and list of. I kind of wish I still had it. I don't know what I did with it. I think I might have gotten rid of it in at one move or another and just got lost to the ages. But that's and this, I think the first spell I ever did was when I was, a tween, and I had this little petition scroll. It's like this tiny little piece of paper that rolled up and went inside this little screw top pendant. And I found that in my jewelry box the other day. It's such a little nostalgic thing.
Was there a spell in it?
There was an intensely cringe-inducing poem. I read it and I cringed myself into a black hole, and then I put it away into my jewelry box.
I cringe when I look at my live journal from like 2003.
Yeah.
And that was not that long ago.
Yeah, this was something that I wrote when I was like 13. It was like I was so into the idea of like soulmates and destined love and all of those big romantic kinds of stories. So it's like a little come to me love poem kind of thing.
Aww.
And it's pretty cute. Like if I was reading it and it wasn't by me, I'd be like, oh, that's adorable. But because I wrote it, I look at it and go, oh, I'm shriveling.
What would you say is your best witchcraft experience?
Okay, so this actually happened fairly recently, like in the last few months. I was starting to work with, I guess, the archetype of the Fae. And so I did this kind of meditation where the intent was to send out these little Fae light messengers to kind of try and find people who would most benefit from or appreciate the work that I do with Bright Witch, and kind of, like help steer them towards my page if that was, something that they'd be open to. So I did this exercise where I visualized these little giggling balls of light just flying out around the world and just kind of tapping people on the shoulder. And a few weeks after that, I got this really interesting email from a new customer. I won't say her last name for privacy, but she told me her name was also Sarah Louise. And she wrote me that she had just woken up that day a few hours before her alarm from a really curious dream. So in this dream, she heard a group of dream characters repeating the name Bright Witch. She described it kind of like they were discussing a private joke or a secret, and that these characters were, in her words, kind of egging her on to investigate the name. So she woke up and she immediately Googled Bright Witch and found my store. And then she saw that when she saw that we had the same name, that's where when she decided to write me and share this little story. And I get goosebumps every time I think about just that connection. So that's why I keep a little fairy altar as a little thank you to those wee cheeky fae.
That's crazy,
isn't it?
I love that story. That's freaking cool.
Yeah. I find it really hard to chalk that up to coincidence. Like every time something like that happens, I will look for, I guess, the mundane explanation. But honestly, the more I spend time on this path,
where is this?
Where is that?
Come on.
How is that a coincidence?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was intense, and I loved that. That was so great.
That's amazing. What would you say is your worst witchcraft experience?
Okay. So I don't know if I'd call it like worst as such, but I did have kind of a really frightening experience. So I was experimenting with astral projection
Oh,
because I just wanted to know if it was real or if it was just lucid dreaming or like what is it? Is it possible? So one day I was kind of napping in and out and meditating, and so I was falling in and out of sleep paralysis, and I could not wake myself up. I'd wake up, I'd have sleep paralysis, but I'd be so tired that I would just kind of keep waking, falling asleep, lucid dreaming, waking, sleep paralysis, and I sort of cycled through that a few times. And one of the times after I woke up with sleep paralysis, but before I fell back asleep, I tried to project. So I kind of rolled over within my body. Like I could physically
oh,
feel myself moving through space while also feeling my body lying still on the bed. So I kind of flipped over and rolled out and landed on all fours beside my bed while I was also still in bed. And I couldn't see anything, but I could feel my position in space, and I was not in I was not in my body. And then I was kind of blind, like everything was kind of dark, and but then there was this kind of tear, like a jagged tear appeared up near the ceiling, and
oh,
shards of this really brilliant white light, like silver white light, was shining through it. And I started rising up towards it,
I don't
and
like it.
I I did not like it. I freaked out because I just had this just really certain sense that if I touched that light, I wasn't coming back. So I just kind of was like, no, wrenched myself out of that experience. And then I think I fell asleep into a lucid dream. And the lucid dream just had this complete different quality of experience to it. So I could distinguish between, this weird kind of, you rolling around kind of feeling and lucid dreaming. They were really distinct. So like I don't know if it was an actual spiritual thing or just like a really funky brain experience that was just brought on by sleep paralysis. Like I don't know, but it was both amazing and very, very frightening.
I don't want that.
No. I haven't tried it since. That was enough.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
What do you feel is your biggest motivator in witchcraft?
Learning for sure. I really love doing deep dives on a new topic or a new skill. So I'll become kind of obsessed with a topic and then I'll move on to a new thing and then I'll cycle back around. So I usually have a few different plates all kind of spinning at once to keep me enthusiastic, but also sometimes riding that edge of burnout. So I was really into tarot for a while and I did courses in tarot and then yeah, just sort of move on from different topics and then I'd be presented with a new thread to chase. And
Are you a
yeah,
cat?
maybe.
Secretly.
I'd love to come back as a cat. Like what do I have to do in this life to come back as a cat? Especially my cat, she lives the most charmed life. She's asleep on the bed at the moment.
Nice. What does she look like?
But yeah. She's a long-haired domestic is it calico? You know, where they've got kind of orange and black and white kind
Mhm.
of. And she's enormous. Like she's just a big cat. She was the alpha of her litter when we rescued her. And she's a little bit chubby, but most of her size is just she's just a big cat. And she's got this kind of ragdoll looking face, and she knows she's cute and exploits it ruthlessly.
What's your biggest motivator in life?
I think it's really the same thing, just learning. Like in I'll do deep dives into learning about different art techniques, or I'll do courses in creative writing. I'll do deep dives into like business learning and entrepreneurial resources, and singing. I really love learning singing, and I've been
Oh,
taking voice lessons for a few years. So that's probably
neat.
the writing and singing are probably the two most consistent topics that I have been learning about over time. But I'll kind of mix and match. Like I'll go through phases where I'm really into one thing, and then I'll kind of pull back from that and go on to a different thing. And yeah, very much shiny object cat brain syndrome for sure.
What do you geek out about?
Oh, okay. So I've got a few things, but I can talk for hours about ghosts and the paranormal. Like I love ghost stories.
Do you
And
have any of
especially
your own?
I do. I do. Would you like me to save that for would you like me to tell it now or save it for like the last story?
It's up to you.
All right. All right, I'll tell it now. So a few years ago. Where do
Yes,
I
that was me
start?
clapping.
So a few years ago, I think I mentioned before, like I went through a really witchy phase when I was, in my teens and then into my early 20s. And I was like really interested in energy work and energy healing and that kind of thing. And then in my mid 20s, I don't know what happened. Like I must have just like read something or something just switched that off. And I just like woke up one day and just didn't believe in any of it.
Huh.
It's just the brain. That's all it is. Everything else is just a quirk of perception, and um that there's nothing really beyond it. And then after a few years of that kind of belief, I was just kind of spiraling a little bit. I didn't really have any kind of spiritual faith or anything that was keeping my head right. And I'd just taken a few kind of setbacks in life at that point, just like in relationships not working out, jobs not working out, that kind of thing. And so I was trying to work on some side projects at that time that were quite stressful. And yeah, I was just in a bad space, and I just Googled proof magic is real. And I came across Dean Radin's book Real Magic, and that kind of opened my mind a little bit to, I guess, the possibility that consciousness isn't necessarily confined to our brains. Um, that there might be a bit more to it than that. So at that time, this was back in 2018, and I was just about to turn 30. And so it was with this kind of still very skeptical but starting to open my mind a little bit mindset that I went on a trip with my friends to New Orleans,
Oh.
and we went on a ghost tour. And I I wasn't really expecting much other than, like really cool histories and spooky stories and wandering through all these really interesting buildings. And um then we come to like the last venue of the evening. It's this ballroom at the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. And so we get a bit of history of the ballroom, and like what its purpose was throughout the years, and how it started. And then as this kind of little piece of theatrical spookiness, that our tour guide had us all lined up against kind of like one wall of the ballroom, and he goes over into the corner to flip out the light. And this poor little child absolutely flees the room. Like he's just like, nope. So this poor, like 13-year-old boy is like, I am out of here. So he just sprints across the room through the ballroom doors and waits outside. So basically the central part of the ballroom area was empty. And so we all started taking photos once the lights were turned out, and then we were kind of all wandering around the ballroom. And I get to the middle of the room, and I kind of just have this really physically intense like physical sensation across my neck and shoulders that kind of feels like a menthol balm, like a tiger balm,
Mm-hmm.
where it's kind of like that prickling heat sensation. It felt like someone had just smeared that all across my back and down my neck.
That's unpleasant.
It was. I was just like, ooh, that was at that point. I'm like, ooh, this is like a psychological reaction to a really spooky atmosphere, and wandering around. And then we wrap up the tour, and we're all waiting outside as we're getting the little okay, thank you for coming, goodbye kind of speech. And I'm flicking back through the photos on my phone, and I look at my screen. I'm like, oh, there's a smudge on the screen. So I'm rubbing at the smudge, in one of my photos, and it's like, okay, that hasn't gone away. So let's zoom in, and I see a face where there should not be a face. And so I bring up the brightness and the levels, and there is this transparent figure standing in the middle of the ballroom right as we were all starting to take photos. This is before anyone started moving around. Like, it's after I took the photo after the kid had fled. Like, he was already out the room. So it wasn't the kid. It wasn't the boy. But, well, like, I tried to explain this figure away. I was getting to the point where I was like, was it like a holographic projection that showed up on my camera, but like not anyone else's for some reason? And like, we couldn't see anything with our eyes. So what would be the point of setting up that technology? And like I just had to come to the conclusion that like I think this is a ghost, and it was the figure was standing in the spot where I felt that sensation. So the two things kind of matched up. And if it wasn't for those two really distinct things, I wouldn't have trusted it. Like, I wouldn't have believed it. And I would not blame anyone else for going, yeah, that sounds like bullshit. But because it happened to me, I'm like, no, that happened. Okay, that's interesting. And it just kind of blew my mind way open. So I guess the possibility of, ghosts or spirits or energetic imprints or whatever it is they actually are. And I was looking at its face, like, we were zooming in, like my friends and I were examining it, like scrutinizing it in detail over the next few days. And zooming in on its face, it had like a motion blur on its head. And it was kind of looking towards the door. And so we were thinking, it's like, maybe it looks like it had followed the boy, like it had turned its head to watch the boy running out of the room. It was really creepy.
That's disturbing.
It was really disturbing.
But then you stood in it. That's horrifying.
I know.
I don't want to stand in anything.
It's like in Harry Potter, you walk through a ghost and you just get like, ooh, what the hell was that?
I don't want that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my ghost story. I've forgotten what the original question was.
That was awful. Thank you. Oh, geeking. Geek things you geek out about. And you said right. Ghosts.
Yes. So I geek out on ghosts and basically anything to do with like paranormal scientific studies, like experiments into psychic phenomena and mind matter interactions and like just quantum squiggly wiggly weirdness. I love it.
I don't think we have the right equipment to catch it all yet.
No, I agree. And it's really interesting as well because there are some experiments where it's like our attention kind of affects the results of things, and our beliefs affects the results and the outcomes of things. So it's, we love science because it's like, what's true is true, and it's, it's set in stone, and it's, you can measure something a million times and you get the same result, and that means it's true. Whereas that kind of doesn't happen when you study consciousness and the way it interplays with the tiniest little facets of our reality. Like, it gets very, very blurry, which I find it so interesting.
I get really excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
But if we're all made of energy,
Dean Radin's book.
If we're all made of energy, it just makes sense that eventually we'll learn how to shift it around from a distance, because everything's energy.
Exactly.
And everybody who's like poo-poos magic and is naysayers about it, that's just science.
Yeah. There's some pretty compelling studies out there that show that is just a reality of energy affects energy at a distance.
Ooh, do you want to hear a theory?
I do. I love theories.
Okay, so why weird shit happens when you're almost asleep. So we have brain waves, right? That we have like a field that comes from our brain that is not necessarily attached. It's not from our brain. It's from ourselves. And I don't remember who did the testing, but they've done testing about this. Someone has.
Yeah.
And weird things Like, I think that's when you're asleep or almost asleep, that's when you hear weird shit. And I think that as you fall asleep, like that field expands a little bit because you're not monitoring it so closely. And
Oh.
so more shit can get in.
Oh, that's really cool. Like your a little radio and your little receptor fields expand
Yes.
and so you pick up more. Ooh, I really like that. That's
And so
cool.
the weirdies are like, this thing's getting bigger. I'm going to slide in here.
Just slide into your little dream DMs.
That's the worst term in existence, but yes.
I apologize.
That term horrifies me so much. I don't even really know why, but it does.
I think the word slide, there's something I really dislike about the word slide.
Especially since they're usually talking about something that's creepy being slid in.
Yeah, exactly. Slippery.
I hate it. How do you feel your environment has shaped your practice, and do you think it might be different if you lived somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be different if I lived in another country, especially if I lived in the northern hemisphere. So this kind of ties in with the spoiler alert, your next question about Sabbats. But
Oh, yeah.
growing up in Australia, our seasons don't really match up directly with the North American or Western European kinds of climates. So we get summer, winter, spring. We get the four seasons, but
It's not a
we kind of
direct mirror.
experience them in a different way. And yeah, that and being in the southern hemisphere means that our seasons are the opposite of what the rest of all of you up there are experiencing. So it kind of makes it hard for me to connect to the seasonal holidays, like the wheel of the year, just because it just doesn't really align that neatly.
Do you feel like... So you've been to the United States.
I have. I've
Okay.
been, a few times.
Do you feel like the magic here is different from the magic where you are?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I feel like it would definitely have to be in definitely in a cultural sense. Um, especially when you're looking at, I guess, going back to indigenous magical
That is
practices and
part of what I'm looking at.
yeah, I'm not super familiar with the many indigenous practices of Native Americans, or even really indigenous Australians. But I grew up hearing things like Dreamtime stories from the local indigenous nations here. They come into our schools and they tell us these kinds of their their kind of children's versions of their stories and their folklore. So I think just growing up with different kinds of imagery, and I think the way in which they're the same would be, there seems to be a strong emphasis on connection with the land. I
Yes.
think the relationships with land will be different between Australia and the US, just because the topography is different, the climates are different. But I really do enjoy just the idea of having a relationship with your environment and a relationship with the nature that you have around you. I think that's something that I really like, and it's something I'd love to even connect with. Going back to, I guess, like my family heritage comes from sort of England and Ireland and Scotland and those kinds of areas. So I'd love to spend more time in the UK and Ireland especially, and get more familiar with the landscapes in those regions. Because
What
I
do you
think, yeah,
think?
environment is really important to shaping so much folklore.
What do you think happened?
Happened.
Yeah, why? Because you and I seem to have a similar ancestral background. What is up with our people that we are not as connected to the land as the people who, like, do I have to go back to where they're from?
Yeah, it's
Is
interesting,
that
isn't it?
it?
Yeah, because like I love Australia. Like I think of Australia as home, but not in the way that it's home for Indigenous nations.
Yeah.
Like there is a different quality of connection, I think, that Aborigines have with Australian landscapes. And just there's something about the weight of history, you know, like comparing 60,000 years of heritage in the land with, 3 or 4 generations of,
Yeah.
my family coming from Europe. There, I'd really love to know more about where my family came from and the threads that go back to those places. Um, yeah,
Have you done any
it
of
does
that?
feel like there's a disconnect. I tried to look up like ancestry.com, and I think my grandma's got a family tree that she's got, and but I can't, like, I don't really know the stories. Like I don't even know how we kind of, like, when did my family arrive in Australia? I don't actually know the story.
Have you
um
done any DNA of the DNA stuff?
no, I haven't done the DNA analysis. I couldn't find any useful information on things like ancestry.com, so I didn't really bother with, ordering a kit or anything. Might be fun to do, just out of curiosity. I mean,
It
I
is fun.
suspect that I'm a 99% English, Scottish, Irish mix. Like I don't think there's anything. Oh, there might be some Dutch, maybe some Germanic heritage. I'm not sure. Yeah, my grandma's not sure where her great grandmother came from, so she suspects that her line might have come over from maybe Denmark, but
Oh.
can't quite find the threads of the records.
Is there like a census in Australia? That's how I found most of my stuff.
Yeah, there is a census. We've actually got a census coming up in August, I think. But yeah, I tried to. I think it might be one of those ones where I'd need to go to maybe a library or some actual record hall. I should look up and see if
Oh yeah, you
I
probably
could
don't
find. I
have.
could find the records of my grandparents' marriage, but I couldn't. I couldn't really find anything before that. The records seemed kind of incomplete, or maybe I was just looking in the wrong place or in the wrong way, and my Google food just was failing me on that day. Who knows?
You probably don't have Jehovah. Is it? I don't know if it's Jehovah's Witnesses or Latter-day Saints obsessing over everyone's genealogy. You probably
Ah,
don't have that because one of the biggest databases of that stuff belongs to, I don't remember which one. It's either LDS or Jehovah's Witnesses,
right. Okay.
which is
I don't.
nuts. Nosies.
I know we have Jehovah's Witnesses here in Australia and Mormon populations, but like I don't really have much contact with them. I uh I knew someone who grew up in something of a kind of an isolated religious cult in, I guess, the
Ooh,
Australian outback, but that's, yeah, I don't really know too much information about it. Like I don't know how sinister it is. Anytime you hear the word cult, you just go, "Ooh, that sounds really
something bad's
sinister," but I
happening.
don't know if it was just more of a closed community kind of thing. This is just how they were describing it.
So, do you celebrate the Sabbats? And do you
The
have a
ones
favorite?
I the ones I only really celebrate are, like Yule and Christmas and, Samhain around Halloween, just because they're so socially mainstream.
Yeah,
And Halloween is definitely my favorite, and Samhain around Halloween, just because I'm an absolute sweet tooth and I'm all about
I
cozy,
was gonna
spooky vibes.
say it's candy time.
Candy time. And I love decorating for Halloween and dressing up and going to parties. And I know, Halloween and Samhain are different things. But I really like the introspective aspects of Samhain, and I guess just doing a little bit of shadow work kind of really ties in with the way I like to practice.
Now, do you do it in October?
Yes. Yeah, we
So it's
our actual
warm.
Samhain, like the equivalent Samhain is more March? April? I'm not sure, but yeah, I kind of celebrate with the Northern Hemisphere timeline.
when it's warm.
Yeah, it's warm,
That
so,
sounds
like,
so great
Christmas
to me.
Christmas is always sweltering hot, so
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it never feels uh, there's a disconnect between watching Christmas movies like Home Alone and where everything's nice and snowy and twinkly lights, and we have the twinkly lights, but you're also wiping sweat from your from your face kinda thing. It's, it's a different vibe.
Huh.
I love snowy winters, though. I've spent a couple of winters in the Northern Hemisphere. I've lived in Germany and then just sort of traveling on various holidays and things. I think I've had a couple of winter Christmases now, and I love them. They're always so magical.
Where did you live in Germany?
I I was there 2 times, actually. I was living and studying there in Dusseldorf, which is on the sort of closer to the northern western area uh, of Germany, and then a few years after that, I lived in Berlin for about 8
Oh,
months. Berlin is incredible. I love Berlin so much.
everyone says that, and I never went. What a moron I am.
I stupidly studied French in high school because I thought, oh, maybe one day I'll live in France, and then I've lived two whole stretches in Germany. never studied the language properly in high school.
But they touch, don't they? Did you go over there?
Go to France or to
Yeah.
Germany? Yeah, I've visited to France. It was actually kind of a funny experience because they seem to hit every. Sorry to all the French people listening to this because I know some wonderful French people, but a lot of them hit the stereotypes of rude French Parisians. I was there in high school. I went on like a school trip over there. I was really really lucky that I got to go, and yeah, we were only in Paris for a few days, but I landed and they lost my bag. So I
Oh,
spent like this
no.
whole trip without luggage. and
Oh.
and the guy at the airport was super rude and was just like, don't you shouldn't make a fuss, it's
Oh my
it's going to be
gosh.
stressful for your host family if you're upset that your bag is missing. I'm like, well, I'm not that upset about it, but you don't have to be a dick. And then the host family, all of them are wonderful except for the daughter who was around our age, 15, 16. Like
Oh,
she
no.
she just threw tantrums. Like it was the weirdest behavior I'd ever seen. Like she would just throw tantrums and go and slam the door and then put on the Black Eyed Peas in protest of something. It was, it's
What?
just it was really strange. And then we were wandering up the Champs-Élysées as part of a
Oh,
school group, and it's where all these like really beautiful, fancy jewelry stores are, and a bunch of 16-year-olds wearing backpacks and really
oh,
daggy
no.
daggy clothes are like, oh, let's go into this really
Oh,
fancy jewelry
no.
store. And it's one of those
And
ones where
touch
they buzz
everything.
you in with a yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They buzz you into the shop, and the doorman must have just been having a really boring day because he kept closing the door in our faces. And we'd go up to because we thought they were automatic doors. So we'd approach the door and they'd open and then they'd slam in our faces like, what's going on? And then we see the little doorman smirking and pushing the button.
Aw. I mean, I feel
So
kind of like what a jerk,
yeah.
but I also feel like good for him for entertaining himself. His job
I thought it
probably
was really
sucks.
funny. I thought it was really funny. I didn't think it was malicious because he was kind of once he knew we'd cottoned on to it, he let us in. But yeah, I love traveling around that area. God, I'd love to explore more of Europe. I just love travel. I cannot wait until the global situation as it
Yeah.
stands is different, so that we can travel again.
Yes. What would you like to see discussed more in the witch community?
I would love to see more discussion of why practices are the way that they are. Like, I want to know more about what people believe about how and why magic works and
Mm-hmm.
how that informs their practice. Because when I started up I guess my witchcraft again a few years ago, I really struggle with the idea of magical correspondences. So, things like crystals and colors and herbs and planets, that they have these kinds of abstract ideas attached to them, like,
Yeah.
like love or a specific kind of healing or a personality trait. And I couldn't find any information on where that came from. Like, why is this associated with this thing?
Yep.
And there's so much history and context that goes into those kinds of correspondences, and then how they translate into folk practices in general, that when you're just looking at a rote list of this crystal means that and that herb means that, you lose all of that really nice history of why that came about. So I wish people would talk more about that. And there are a lot of YouTubers that do exactly that. There's one I subscribe to who's a real big history buff, and she goes into the history of specific aspects of pagan history and practices that I really enjoy that kind of thing.
You and Kim Stoll are on the same page. Her example was rosemary.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, there's
along that line, I want to
Mhm.
know if, like malachite, are we
Malachite. Is that
using
the
it?
the green one?
Yeah, are we using it for
Yeah.
money because it's green and our money is green? What if you're not from the United States?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because my money looks like Monopoly money.
Yeah. Do you use
Um
rainbow fluorite?
I like gold. I really like
Oh
gold for
yeah.
it because it's like that's the OG money. Or salt. I guess you could use
But
salt.
could you use rainbow
Mm.
fluorite for a color
Yeah, you could. I don't
word
see
I've
why not.
forgotten already and you just said it? What did you just say? What is that word? What are we
Gold,
discussing? No.
money.
Correspondence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you could, because I think, it ties back to, I guess, the, consciousness, like, whatever you kind of associate, whatever helps you foster a particular state of mind in yourself and the associations that you have,
Yeah.
I think is the important thing. Like, I do think that there is a kind of momentum, like when you have cultural agreements around, green means money or gold means luck, or, these kinds of things. I think that does get a bit of momentum in and collective weight in consciousness that's really interesting and can be powerful to tap into and draw upon. But I wouldn't discount your own personal associations at all. If you associate rosemary with something completely different than what it's written down on paper correspondences are supposed to be, then I think you can absolutely go for bringing that into your own craft.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of do what you can with what you have.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know
absolutely.
hardly any of the correspondences of what grows on my property. I just know what I see it do. So I know what I tell it to do in my work.
Yeah, yeah.
Just continue doing that thing that I see you doing.
Exactly. It's this sort of like, you know, the the path of least resistance kind of idea of, like,
Yeah.
if the energy is flowing in a particular direction and behaving in a particular way, then, just to push it further along that path.
Yeah. Thinking back to when you were new at witchcraft, what do you wish somebody had told you?
I think I wish someone had told me to journal my experiences more. Like, I wish that was something I had thought to do. Because, I mentioned before that I went through kind of two phases of witchy spiritualism. So I was big into it into a teen, into my early 20s, and now I'm really interested in it again. Um, and I feel like if I had actually, like, it wasn't until I had that kind of ghost experience and that energy sensation that I really started remembering past experiences that I'd had before that with the same kind of energy. So, things like little moments of clairvoyance even, or clairsentience, and what that feels like and what that was like. So if I'd thought to document that at the time that I had those experiences, I might not have, I guess, lost the faith in those intervening years, because I would have had my own roadmap to refer
Mm-hmm.
to and go, well, that's what that felt like, and that was my experience then, and I captured it right after it happened, so that I know it's not tainted or distorted by memory over time. And I think that would have been really useful for me to have over the years, and be really interesting as well to look back on those little experiences in childhood, and just little weirdness of things like, oh, I can't explain this now, maybe I can explain it in years to come.
Yeah. Who would you say are the 3 biggest influences on your practice?
So the 3 biggest, the first one would definitely be all the women in my family, especially my mother. So she introduced me to so many beautiful illustrated storybooks and fairy tales and art and crafts that really informed my artistic taste and style today. And we watch movies like, Practical Magic and Ever After together, and she'd make up fairy stories at night to help me sleep. And she'd read, Harry Potter to me and my brother before bed. And just that, even the music she listened to while I was growing up was like just really witchy, like Stevie Nicks and Tori Amos and Robin Dunn. And she just really fostered a sense of magic and curiosity while we were growing up that is really influenced kind of everything that I connect to in a nostalgic way today. And the next influence would definitely be scientists like Dean Radin and Peter Fenwick. So seeing people within the scientific community move from non-believers to skeptically open-minded to, well, here are the findings. We're pretty sure there's something spooky going on here. Has really informed the way that I approach magical practice. And I'm like, well, does it work in this context, and why not, and why does it? And I don't do well with things like, here's a spell, put this candle next to this ribbon, and now your spell will work because it's a
Mm-hmm.
cake. It's like a shake and mix. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not how I think about it. I have to have an understanding of the mechanics behind why things work or don't
Yeah.
work.
Yes.
Yeah, and the third influence would be just the online community at large, for sure. So YouTubers and community figures like Harmony Nice was the first one I started watching. Thorn Mooney, Brown and Bendy, Gem Goddess, Wabar, obviously, and even Rachel Stephen, who is a teacher of narrative craft, who is also a witch. Honestly, the list is so long. Harmony Nice was like my very first introduction, and I watched her video on tea leaf reading, and then I got really into her supernatural stories, and then the algorithm just kind of fed me all of this goodness over time. So now I've got a good list of people I turn to.
Who do you think I should have on the show?
I second Macy on this. I would love to hear Jordan from Moonlight's Apothecary on the show. I watched one of her ghost hunter videos, and it gave me a headache for hours. I loved it, like, not the headache, but just the sheer energy of what she captured on video was really amazing. And I've always really enjoyed hearing her on Wabar, so I'd definitely love to hear more from her.
Me too. I haven't asked her yet. I was like fell back into thought because I bought like a group of readings from her. And
Yeah.
when I talked to her about starting a podcast, and she's like, yeah, you should absolutely do it.
Yeah.
And she like told me the things that I needed to do. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to ask her.
Yeah. I should get a reading from her. That sounds really interesting.
Yes.
Did you hear on one of the podcasts that she was on, I think it was at one of the Halloween specials, maybe, or the Spooky Sode specials, I can't remember, but while she was talking with Macy and Charlie on Wabar,
The
there was this kind of
whispers.
whispering,
Yes,
whispering in the
Jesus.
background. I was listening to that with my partner Zach, and he's like, "Ooh, that's a really cool audio effect." I'm like, "Yeah, that's creative." And then hearing Macy or Charlie say after that's like, "No, we didn't hear that at the time. That was not put in."
Yeah.
It's She's just carrying the gateway to other realms.
That's so weird. I would like you to recommend something, anything at all.
I think I would recommend Dean Radin's book Real Magic. Like that was so instrumental to me opening my mind to certain spiritual possibilities. Like that was my gateway. And so if if anyone listening is at all interested in the science of consciousness and how mind and matter kind of interplay and like to really do a deep dive on the mechanics of that, I'd really recommend that book.
I know you told a story already, but please tell me another story. Any story. It doesn't have to be witchy or ghosty. It can be something stupid that happened that you like to tell people because it makes you laugh.
The only things that keep coming to mind are these like little experiences that I had as a kid. And just like these moments of strange, inexplicable knowing.
Oh, I love these.
Like they're not like they're so trivial. Like they weren't really anything, like the great prophecies foretold kind of moments or anything like that. But I remember one time there was like a quiz happening in class, and you'd have to raise your hand and then answer the quiz question before anyone else did. And there was a before the teacher had asked the next question, I knew in my heart and mind and soul that the answer was going to be 90. I don't know why. And so the teacher had only half asked the question when I raised my hand and just shouted 90. And the question ended up being, what is the angle of a right angle?
Huh.
And it's just like just this really weird. I think the thing that stands out about it is like there's just like this really bizarre feeling of certainty. Like how when you go 2 plus 2, what does that equal? 4. You don't question it; it's just certain.
Yeah.
There was that kind of feeling to it, which I thought was really just really interesting. And there was another moment where I remember my mum had picked my brother and I up from school. Must have been sort of like just before we were teenagers or something, and she seemed kind of a bit stressed about something. And we're driving along, and I had this kind of like just mental image of like this. It was like a scene from a film clip. I can't remember which film clip it was, but there was this like this yellow sign that just read "Notice of Eviction," and it was just like really strong in my mind. And then I was like really confused, and then just kind of returned to reality. I'm like, oh, that was a really weird kind of mental image to have. And that my mum tells me later that we had to move out of the house we were renting in at that time because the owners wanted to move back in, and that's why she was stressed out. It's just like these little pockets of just like weird imagery, or just knowing that
Yeah.
I'm trying to tap into again, because that was just, it'd be so useful if you could channel that into something practical.
Yeah, on a regular basis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the stories.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I've had such a fun time. This has
Thanks
been
for
really good.
being here. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right, I have a coupon code for 15% off using the code Who Which Where.
Yay. Thank you. So, listeners, go get you some tea. They're super pretty, and I bet they smell amazing.
They do. Sometimes I would just sit there and just like huff it as I'm making it. Like I'll spoon it out into the little tray, and I'll just sit there and like cinnamon or berries.
I'm obsessed with the blue moon. I can't wait to smell it.
Well, I hope you enjoy it when you get it. I'll send through your details, and I'll ship you some.
Plus, Ken loves blueberries. Like, he's crazy for them. So,
Oh, nice.
we're about
Yeah,
that.
I love elderberry. Like I'm so into elderberry flavored things. Like elderberry syrup as well. Like, oh, I love it. I actually added some elderberry syrup to the Blue Moon along with some, like as part of a party cocktail. I think I added some vodka
Oh.
to it, and
Oh.
it's yeah, it
What?
wasn't bad. I made like a big vat of it, and so there's like this big sparkly glass dispenser of glittery party cocktail for a Halloween party one year.
Oh
It was
my
great.
gosh, that sounds amazing. Holy moly.
Time to give it up.
Blue Moon is decaf,
Blue
right?
Moon is caffeine free. Yeah, I've got a few
Okay.
blends that like the Rooibos ones are caffeine free. I
Okay.
think there are four. Four of them are caffeine free.
That's what I need. I just apparently can't do it anymore, which makes me
Yeah.
very sad because I love some sweet tea because I'm from Virginia. Well, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks again so much for having me. It was a great time.
Yay. And I will see you out on the internet.
Surfing the waves of the interwebs.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Sarah Louise for coming on the show. I really had a good time talking to her. I have had the chance to try the Blue Moon tea that we talked about, and it is delicious.
Time to give it up.
Blue Moon is decaf,
Blue
right?
Moon is caffeine free. Yeah, I've got a few
Okay.
blends that like the Rooibos ones are caffeine free. I
Okay.
think there are four. Four of them are caffeine free.
That's what I need. I just apparently can't do it anymore, which makes me
Yeah.
very sad because I love some sweet tea because I'm from Virginia. Well, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks again so much for having me. It was a great time.
Yay. And I will see you out on the internet.
Surfing the waves of the interwebs.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Sarah Louise for coming on the show. I really had a good time talking to her. I have had the chance to try the Blue Moon tea that we talked about, and it is delicious. You really need to take advantage of that coupon code and go check it out for yourself. I'm also really happy to say that I got my first review, and it is by the Jeb Abides, and they say, I heard about Clever Kim from another podcast that I adore, the Witch Bitch Amateur Hour. So when I found out they started their own pod, I knew I had to check it out. I instantly fell in love with it. It's so great to hear from different witches with different perspectives and practices. I'm a solitary witch and I'm fairly new-ish to the community. I deal with imposter syndrome and comparing myself to other witches a lot. Listening to this podcast helps bring me back to my center and helps me realize that everyone practices differently and at their own pace. Each episode is like a wake-up call for me and snaps me out of thinking that the way I practice my craft is wrong or inadequate. Each witch Kim has interviewed so far has been vastly different than the last, yet similar in the fact that they are all witches just like me. I recommend this podcast to all witches, but especially solitary witches like myself. I look forward to it every time the moon changes. That makes me feel great because part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is not just because I'm a nosy person and I want to hear people tell me about their lives, but also because we are all different, but we are also very much the same, and I wanted to show that in the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, I would love it if you would go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It helps grow the podcast, and you just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Who Witch Where podcast. You can find me all around the internet on Instagram at Who Witch Where Pod, Twitter at WherePod, Facebook at facebook.com/Who Witch Where podcast, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to whowitchwherepod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the moon changes.